don't think I'm connected. All right. Okay. I don't know. Did I just pin somebody? Oops. Um, yeah, so again, just have your cameras on. It's mainly for the recording and for myself to see you guys. And I hope you guys are doing good. It's been a week, but I hope you guys got started on your um, started thinking about your capstone projects. I had a bunch of people message me, and you can definitely do that, by the way. If you want to message me for some confirmation on your project or you're confused, I can help guide you throughout that process. So today, we're not going to go over the summaries directly today. That's going to be our next meeting because so many of you guys have not submitted them. And also there are a lot of you. So I want to make sure I get through those summaries. My plan is to have some people present next meeting if they really summarize really well. And then I'm going to go over what makes a good summary, blah, blah, blah. But that's not today's meeting. Today's meeting is more so focused on the capstone project because I want you guys to get a head start on that. The earlier we get started, the more time you guys have to develop your project. And I know that a lot of you guys have been chatting in the chat and telling each other, or sorry, communicating with each other what you guys want to do. And that's really good. So I want you guys to keep doing that. Just keep letting others know what kind of projects you like to do and get people to go on board with you. So again, you can work in groups for your capstone project, up to 5 people in one group. We don't want to do more than that because then the presenting becomes a problem. But you don't have to do groups. You can go solo. So while I talk, do the attendance link. You can scan the QR code or just use the link. Make sure you do your attendance. Yeah, so I'll give you guys like a minute to do that, and I'll just keep talking, I guess. Yeah, keep focusing on your capstone projects. I saw a lot of good project ideas. Some of you guys actually DM me with, some questions you guys had that you could do for research. These are great questions. It's so again, neuroscience is such a broad topic, so there's so many of you guys that have different like ideas, and I think that's amazing. There's so many of you with projects that really are super broad. Everyone's project is super different. And so it's really not all just the same things, right? There's also different topics in neuroscience, right? There's oh my God, neurodegenerative diseases. There's psychology bases like disorders. There's neurotechnology. There's so many different types of projects that you guys can go for. And I love seeing that, and the professors will love seeing that. So again, unfortunately, the professors could not join us today. Today's meeting was something that we had planned, so this was one of our more important meetings. But as for the meetings that we're scheduling with them, we are scheduling meetings with them. We're in communication right now, so there are planned meetings with them. And what I hope to have them do is give you guys presentations, but also to review you guys' projects a little bit. Again, there's so many of you. The reason we have groups as an option is because it kind of reduces the workload for each individual member and also for us, and we can review your projects easier. Again, you don't have to do it in a group. It's completely up to you. But yeah, we do have some plans to have the professors kind of help you guys out. So an important announcement. I know I've made this announcement, I think twice, maybe 3 times already. And I just wanted this is the last time I'm going to mention it in person. I'm not going to send it in the Slack anymore. Please, please, please make sure you read all the announcements. There's so many of you that are just reacting, not reading them, or just not reacting at all. There's 200 of you guys that were admitted, right? It shows a little above 200 because that's including me and the professors, and there's some people with other accounts. There's basically 200 of you, and so only around 100 of you have completed the summaries. Only around 100 of you seem to be actively reacting and actively checking the announcements, and only about 100 of you are in this meeting right now. So either half the entire cohort is inactive, or they're not telling me something. A lot of people are unable to make the meetings because they're international or they have something and they message me, and that's okay. But the summaries is something completely like asynchronous. And if you're not completing the summary and you didn't message me a reason, then there's a disconnect there, and that's a problem because I'm still getting emails from people that are interested in joining. If you saw my new announcement, we added our community scholars. There's gonna be, we just rolled out the messages, so only a couple people got them so far, but there are people that are continuing to get them. And so there's going to be upwards of 1,000 members in the Slack. And those are all people that are, willing to join this program, and they're people that could actually gain from this program. And if you're not putting in your all, I'm just going to ask you to, you can message me. If you don't even want to do this program, if you're here out of like, damn, I signed up, I might as well get the perks. If you don't really want to do it, that's fine. You can just message me, and then you can stay in the Slack, and then we'll have someone else take your spot. It's not the end of the world, but these are people that might be interested in neuroscience, and you guys are taking away their spots if you're not active. But that's only some of you. For those of you guys who are here, I don't doubt that. You guys are, clearly able to catch up on your work and do your tasks. So I don't have a problem with you guys who are here. This is more so for the recording, for those of you who are watching the recording and not doing anything. Um, but again, that's too much on that. I know I mentioned this several times. You guys are probably tired of hearing this because you guys are active, but yeah, okay. So we're going to go into the capstone angle for our project. So I mentioned a lot of things in our last meeting. I went over different websites like PubMed. Again, I will say this program is very introductory, right? This is meant for people who maybe have done research once or never before, and they want to get into research and they want to get into neuroscience, and they haven't been able to do that. So I'm going to go over like complete basics, but this could go over something that you may not or have already known. So PubMed, right? This is a website that I used last time. Many of you guys have already used it because I made you guys go on to PubMed to gather the DOI, which you guys might not know what DOI is. I'll go into that later. Basically, PubMed is a searchable database for scientific research studies. So this page right here on the bottom, some of you guys might not have actually seen this because when you search up PubMed and you go to PubMed, you typically click a paper rather than going to the actual PubMed website. And so this website is very, very open source and very important to you guys for research. It's basically your main hub. Like you're going to use this all the time. And the reason I showed this specific image is because people don't know that you can, in this little search box, you can type in keywords for your topic. And so keywords are something we're going to go over on a later time, but basically those are the words that are like the buzzwords for your topic, right? If you've ever used, okay, I'm going to use an example. If you ever posted on social media, you might have hashtags or something for your niche or whatever. That hashtag is like your keyword, right? What does it have to do with your specific video? What does it have to do with your research paper? And so people don't know you can just search up keywords here and find research papers that are related to your topic. So instead of searching on Google and maybe seeing some papers, which isn't a bad idea, you should go search on Google for your topic. You can search directly on PubMed and it shows you the research papers that are directly related to your topic. And that's super useful. So we'll go more into that later. Here's an example of what PubMed looks like. You guys might recognize this is the paper that we had you summarize. And there are different things here. Can someone tell me if you can see my cursor or no? If you can't, then
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Yes, we can.
okay, perfect. So right here you can see the title, right? That's simple. The affiliations here, these are the people, these are the authors, and then when you click affiliations, it shows you what institution they're from. So their university, their school, maybe they're from a hospital. So hopefully, eventually, one day, you guys will be up here on the PubMed website, right? And it sounds like this big, big, big accomplishment, and it is, but it's also very achievable, right? It's not something that's super hard to do. It's not easy, but you guys can definitely make it there. PMID, we're going to go into this, and DOI, we're going to go into this. So you're looking at this website, you might not know what a lot of this means. Like if you look up here, it shows cognition and then all this random junk here. You might not know what this means. Basically, it just tells you when this was published. This is the day it was published, March 10th, 2016. This is the cognition is the research journal is published in. And then this DOI number is basically just where that, well, I'll go into DOI later, but it's basically just the link to the web article rather than the PubMed page. And so on PubMed, you typically have papers that just have their abstract. There are some papers that are completely open source and free, where the entire paper is on PubMed. You can search through it. You can see the abstract and all the different subsections. But most of the time, because these are posted in research journals, you just see the abstract and you have to pay for the full access to the link. But as we went over in our last meeting, I don't want you guys paying for anything. You guys can use that website I told you about, the extension on paywall, which sometimes it gives you just the full paper for free. Never pay for research. I promise you it's not worth it. You guys can always find it for free. Right? There's always methods to find it for free. Okay, DOI. So DOI is not technically like completely related to PubMed. It's more of an online thing called Digital Object Identifier. But what it basically does is just gives you a permanent link to that page. So if we go back here, you see that this is the DOI like web link. Before this is going to say like doi.org/ and then this little text right here. When you click that, it just relinks you to the web article. That's basically it. PMID and PMCID. So this is actually really, really useful for when you're actually doing research on like a a doctoral level, right? Because there are like certain extensions, certain websites where you just put in the PMID and it gives you that article. But these are still important for you to know. So they're basically just identifier numbers and letters that are related to that study. So it's kind of like the PubMed link and the DOI link, but as IDs, right? The PMID is just for that PubMed link, that PubMed study, and it's completely unique to that. And the PMCID is the same thing, but for the actual web article. Pretty simple. Okay, so now we're gonna get to like the research stuff. I had this question asked a lot, so I wanted to go over it today. What is P? So P in research is more of a statistical thing, but it's not a super hard concept to understand when you fully understand it. So when you see it at first, you're like, you constantly see P equals blah, blah, blah number in parentheses, and you might not know what that means. P is basically just a statistical variable. So it represents the chance that your result was completely due to luck. So, for example, if we have, let's say we have a study where there's a drug group and a placebo group, and that drug group is experiencing an effect. How often are they experiencing that effect, and what is the chance that they're experiencing that effect due to luck, right? So our baseline for luck determination is 0.05, right? P is a value between 0 and 1. So every time you see P equals in a research study, it's always a number between 0 and 1. If it's 0.05 or below, which represents a percentage rate, it'd be 5%. That means that there's only like a 5% chance um, your result was due to luck, which is a very low chance that it was due to luck. So we consider that something called statistically significant. That means that your result is, really reliable. It's probably not due to luck. That's such a low chance. But if your p-value is somewhere like zero point 0.3, 0.5, that means like 35%, or sorry, 30% or 50% chance for it to be due to luck. That's completely unreliable because there's a high chance that your result was due to luck, right? So that was a question I got a lot. I hope that explained it to you. You guys can always look it up a little bit more to understand what is your what P is. You guys can always go into that in more depth. And you guys can also ask consensus. Consensus will definitely tell you what that is. Okay, so for capstone projects, I had a lot of you guys asking me what to do with capstone projects. Again, it's introductory, so many people don't really know how to start. But some of you have already started. This is more so for our literature review people. If you're working on an independent project, you probably already have a lot of this defined and started, so you don't really need my help with that. And you're more so using this as a resource to get a little more help and then eventually get that mini publication on our website. But as of now, this is for people who they don't have a designated project. They're just starting out. So basically, what you need for a capstone project is a problem. All research, good research specifically, solves a problem. If you're just doing research for the sake of doing research, maybe you want to do it because you want it on your college application, or maybe you want to do it because you want to search up your name and see the PubMed link. It's it's a sad truth, but it is the truth. That actually does happen. There's people that do that, and they find research on a completely random subject. They might not be interested in it, and it's this random project that kind of doesn't make sense. And eventually they get a publication. Why? Because their research was with an important person, whatever. Your research, and I want every person's research here to be something important. It has to relate to a problem, right? And again, I saw a bunch of people messaging me about their specific problems that they're trying to figure out. Some people were talking about medical problems, psychological problems. Those are great problems, and I want you guys to focus on a specific problem for your research to solve. Lydia, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, so I'm kind of doing a topic that's like a lot of research, but I don't really get how I can turn it into like, for instance, my topic's kind of like how AI has like an impact on like different parts of the brain, like for instance, creativity and problem solving. But like, how exactly can I turn that into a question, like for like
So
a
you kind
problem
of
because you solve one?
Sure. So you kind of asked the question right there. So that's more of a theoretical question. And so that's something where there might not be a problem yet, but there's problems developing. And I'm pretty sure if you look it up, you can find problems. So that is something that was actually studied. I've heard about that, where AI use is making people, for lack of better terms, dumber because they're relying on AI and technology rather than using critical thinking skills, right? I'm hoping that's none of you guys. Some of you did use AI in your applications, but I was like, okay, maybe you guys are just, a little lazy. It's okay. Um, but yeah, that is a great project. I love that idea. kind of just like brainstorm really, right? I mean, that question that you asked is good enough to be your research question. How does AI usage affect the brain in critical thinking skills? Something like that, right? And again, you can always use like consensus AI or just AI in general to help you develop a question. That's not really like cheating or plagiarizing or whatever. That's just you using a tool to help you come up with a question that's more scientific, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I got you. But great topic right there. And see, that's an example of what I want you guys to think of problems, right? That is a problem that is developing right now, AI usage and neurological issues. And that's just one example. There's so many examples. There's so many different topics that you guys can use. And, just really think of a problem because that good research solves problems. I can't stress that enough. And with your problem comes a question. So kind of like what Lydia was saying, her problem, I'm going to use your problem as an example, Lydia, if that's okay. AI usage affects the brain, and your question could be like, how does AI usage affect the brain? Or you can get more specific, like how does AI usage affect critical thinking skills and decision making? Something like that, right? You can get really specific. You can be a little broad. It's up to you. Usually, more specific research is typically better in the long run because it gives you a direct example. But for you guys, it might be a little harder to find research papers that align with like a very specific example. So I don't want you guys to go too specific and too narrow with your research question. And then your last thing is a potential answer to that question. So like in Lydia's case, maybe your answer is AI does affect critical thinking skills and decision making because it does this. Like maybe it damages your neurons, or maybe your neuronal pathways get used to using AI so much that you can't form different critical thinking, neurons, something like that, right? Yeah, Shruti, you have a question?
Yeah, so if we are doing like a literature review and we've like thought of a problem or we're like working with our group to think of a problem, are there like certain requirements like you need this many articles reviewed or this like length of a paper for like the like submitting it like as possible like for the capstone project?
Sure. So what I want you guys to have for your sources, which is what you're reviewing, I want 5 minimum at the moment. Um, because usually when you have around 5, you have a good pool where it's not too little and it's not too much. So 5 is the minimum. You can always go more than that. I don't think there is a too much, but if it's below 5, it's kind of, it's kind of iffy. So I want 5 minimum, and then you can come up with your problem. Okay. Lydia?
Sorry, I also had like a question like related to this kind of like I was wondering, so like obviously you're gonna at some, well, not obviously, but hopefully you'll give us like a list of requirements for the project or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. So
And
right now
then
we're just going over. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, no, you can finish, you can finish.
No. Right now we're just going over like the basics of a capstone project before I go into the requirements for you guys. This project is more so open-ended, so it's not going to be too restrictive. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Sorry, and then I was just wondering, like you were saying, come up with a potential answer. Does the answer have to be a solution, or does it just have to be like analysis or like a final result of what you figured out through research?
I'll get into that, but it's more so just how does one thing affect another thing? Well, what is your
Oh,
answer to that? So like maybe with your problem, it'd be like AI usage does affect or it doesn't affect critical thinking skills because of blank or something like that, right? But to answer you, Lydia, to answer your question, I basically just rephrased these 3 topics right here into 3 things. And you guys have maybe seen these topics before, these terms, and I hope you have. If you haven't, that's okay. I tried to choose people for our cohort that were more scientifically experienced, like they had maybe bio research, chem, psych backgrounds. If you don't have that, it's completely okay. You were chosen for a reason. But I will go over these. Purpose and research question, those are pretty self-explanatory. Your purpose is why you're doing the project, so that's your problem. Your research question is the question that you're answering, and then hypothesis. So hopefully most of you do know what that term is. Can I get like some thumbs up if you do know what that term is? I should see probably a lot. I think a lot of people do know what that term is. Okay, I see a lot of thumbs up. If you don't know, that's okay. I'll go over that in a second. But that's basically, that's kind of that whole question, that answer aspect, right? That's just your hypothesis. And so, again, if you don't know what hypothesis is, I had some people ask DM me that after our first meeting. They were like looking up what hypotheses were. And it's basically just your testable statement related to your research. So For more quantifiable research where you're using like direct examples, you're like, how does this thing affect this thing? That's where you use a hypothesis. It's more like, how does one thing being changed affect another? And I hope you've heard of the terms independent and dependent variable. Again, if you haven't, that's okay. If you haven't heard of these terms, I urge you to like look them up on your free time because I'm pretty sure most people here have heard these terms. So teaching it would be a little redundant. So I'm just gonna go over them very broadly. An independent variable is something you change, and a dependent variable is like your result, right? And so that's basically what your hypothesis is. But for neuroscience, research is like very theoretical. So a lot of the time, these papers don't actually have a full hypothesis. It's more so just this research question and then how our results basically focus on that problem that that question answers. So it's more so problem based rather than question and hypothesis. The problem is way more important than that question and hypothesis because that problem might have multiple questions associated with it. So that research is more so associated with your problem than your question and hypothesis. But for your projects, I do want you guys to form a question and hypothesis because it helps you get that standing for research in the future. So null and alternative hypothesis, this is something important. This actually relates to the P thing. I'll go over that in a second. But basically, there's like two hypotheses you can have for your research. A null hypothesis is your standard, it's your baseline. It basically says that there's no change and no statistical relationship between variables. So I'll use an example. Some of you have heard this example before. It's more of a psychology example. Eating ice cream makes you kill people, right? If you've heard of that before, you kind of get the gist. But that's our hypothesis. Eating ice cream kills people. So that's not our null hypothesis. That'd be our alternative hypothesis. A null hypothesis for eating ice cream kills people is, or makes you kill people is eating ice cream has no relation to you killing people, right? Eating ice cream is not going to make you kill people. So that's your null hypothesis. Your alternative hypothesis is your claim. So it's basically saying that there is a change, there is a relationship. So eating ice cream does make you kill people. It's false, don't believe that, but that is your alternative hypothesis. So usually you'll have two hypotheses for your project. I want you guys to just have the one, which is your alternative hypothesis. You don't need a null hypothesis, but if you want to put that in your project, it's a little more advanced, up to you. And the reason this relates to your p-value is you actually have these hypotheses for each little variable that you change. So let's say that for that ice cream example, our p-value of eating ice cream and then you killing people is like 70 or 0.7, right? 70%. That means that there's a 70% chance that that's completely due to luck, that you eating your ice cream makes you kill people, right? Because that's not related at all. And so that means that it's so statistically insignificant that you do something called fail to reject your null hypothesis. So you either reject or fail to reject your null hypothesis. If you reject it, that means that your claim is pretty much it's valid, right? If you reject your null hypothesis, your standard, which is that there's no change, that means that there might be a change. It doesn't guarantee that your alternative hypothesis is true. It just means that it could be true. If you fail to reject your null hypothesis, which in the ice cream case it would be because they're not related, it's more of a weather thing. That means that your null hypothesis is true and there is no relationship. If that was kind of hard to understand, I urge you to look it up. If you did understand that because you might have some background in this, then that's good. You understand what to do, and you can choose to use your null hypothesis in your research. You can choose to have both of these. Again, up to you. Okay, independent. I'm going to go over this really, really broadly. Again, I already went over this. It's just the thing that you change, which is your independent variable, and the dependent variable is the variable that changes. That's your result. You guys can look at the slide. I just have it here for the recording. I'm not going to go over that too in depth. Okay, this is the most important part of your capstone project, which is each individual section. So you're going to have your abstract, your introduction, your methods, results, discussion, and references. So for most of you guys, these are very familiar terms. For those of you who it's not super familiar with, I'll go over that so it's not super, super confusing. But basically, we already went over this a little bit in our last meeting, but the abstract is the summary of your paper. So whenever you open a PubMed link, it's usually the first thing you see. Sometimes it's the only thing you see. But whenever you open a research paper, this is always, or pretty much always, the first thing you see. It's at the top. It's just the summary of your paper. So as you guys work on your capstone projects, you kind of draft your abstract throughout it, but you don't finish your abstract till the very end because you can't summarize your paper until your paper is done, right? So your abstract is completed at the very end. So I don't want you guys to see, oh, the abstract is first. I need to write my abstract right now. How do I do that? That's what gets people like tripped up. They try to make their abstract and they don't know how to do it. You finish this at the end. You can start drafting it throughout your research, which you're always drafting your paper throughout your research. You should always be logging what you're doing. You should be writing down stuff. But again, you complete this at the very end. Introduction. So this part is super looked over in research. Some people just kind of write a very, very simple introduction and they move on. I want you guys to remember that your research project is something that's, you might know a lot about it. I've worked on research projects before and, it's something that's so specific. Like I worked on specific things related to like neuroinflammation in the brain and like BMI and body fat percentage on neurons and specific protein levels. And if I name those proteins, you guys might not even know what those are. So your introduction is where you introduce your topic, right? It sounds super self-explanatory, but it's super overlooked. I want you guys to think about it from someone else's perspective. Because from your perspective, you understand this project very well. To people who don't know your project, they're so confused. Like, for example, that paper I had you guys summarize, that introduction, it was pretty good, but for most of it, it was kind of hard to follow along. Like, I got so many DMs saying that this is really hard to follow along. It was intentionally meant to be a little bit difficult. It wasn't a super difficult paper, but it was somewhere in between. So I can, see where you guys are. Your introduction, I want you guys to be, in depth, explain things. And another thing where your introduction is super important for is explaining your problem. So for example, Lydia, I'm going to use your example once again, AI use and, reliance on AI use because you lack critical thinking skills, something like that, right? Your introduction is where you would introduce that problem. You'd mention that problem. You'd mention like, here's where that problem's occurring. Here's an example, a statistic where that, where AI use is making you, for lack of a better term, dumber, right? You basically want your introduction to be your starting point. And this is super important. I want you guys to all start with your introduction. What is your problem? Explain the problem in the introduction. Because when I make you guys create a problem, like if we go back, we have these 3 things here. These are not sections of research, right? These are the sections of research. Your problem goes in your introduction. You explain your problem in your introduction. And again, like I said, every good research problem has, or every good research has a problem. So your introduction should be stacked. I want you guys to have a good introduction that clearly explains your problem and explains what your research does to solve that problem. Okay. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. I'm gonna ask you guys to ask questions at the end, but you can put them in the chat right now. And then always look things up, right? If you're having trouble following along, just let me know or look it up to you. Again, this is where you explain your problem. This is super important. All right. At the very end, when we're done with all our sections, I'm going to go over a research problem and project that I worked on. I'm going to show you guys step by step what I did. Methods. So, I forgot to mention, sometimes introduction is called background. I want you guys to call it introductions. That's the standard. Methods, again, this is sometimes called methodology. Methods is typically the standard for research papers. Methodology is like the whole scientific term. We don't really use that. Methods is also pretty important. This is basically just the materials you used, the research you conducted, and your steps. So for wet lab research, wet lab basically means you're in an actual laboratory and you're dealing with, tools and equipment. Your materials would be listed here. But for you guys, most of you are doing online research, or you guys are doing literature reviews. For those of you doing independent projects, again, I mentioned it has to be related to neuroscience now. So if you are doing a wet lab neuroscience project, let me know. That's like super impressive. But I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are doing online research. So your methods are basically just your steps. What did you do? For a literature review, I'm going to give you guys like a preset template for your methods, because basically all you guys are doing is reviewing online papers and studies on a database, PubMed, and then relating that to your topic. But your steps will still be, unique to you. I want you guys to mess around a little bit, but I will give you guys a template for this. All right. And how did you conduct your research? What papers did you analyze? What keywords you used, et cetera, et cetera. This part's not too complicated. Results. This is probably the most important part of your research. I'm pretty sure you guys know that. This is basically just what is the outcome of your research? What are the results that you obtained, right? What did you find out from your research? So essentially, I don't think this is too difficult to understand. It's basically just what you got from your review or your study. For those of you doing independent research, it's basically, it's different for you guys. It's what results you got. I can't really explain that. I don't want to overexplain this too much. It's just your results, right? For your literature review, it's just what did you find from the studies that you looked over? All right. Pretty simple. Discussion. Okay, this part is also really overlooked. This part and the introduction are super overlooked. The discussion is what your results mean. And I want you guys to be like really in depth and specific with this. Um, if you were to use writing as an example, your introduction would be like your background, your results would be your evidence, and then your discussion would be like your reasoning, right? Maybe you guys have heard of like CER, like claim evidence reasoning, or ACE, answer, cite, evidence, something like that. Um, Basically your discussion is you explaining your results. What do your results mean? And then also, oh, this is cut off. I don't know why it's like that. How do they impact each other, right? How does your results impact your, because you might not get just one result, you might find multiple results. How do they impact each other? And this is super important. This is where you explain the relation of your results back to your problem. Again, I can't stress enough how important your problem is. This is where you talk about your results in relation to your problem. If you found results and they have no relation to your problem, your research is inconclusive and it's incomplete. You have to do something else because it doesn't mean anything. So sometimes you might have a research project where you go over a discussion and then a conclusion as a separate subsection. For research papers, they typically just have a discussion section. So your conclusion goes a part of your discussion. So after you discuss your results, you just kind of add your conclusion onto the end. What do your results mean? And then how do they relate to your problem? Again, super simple. I don't want to over-explain too much. References, this is the simplest part. It's basically just your sources. So if we go back to PubMed, I'm going to just go to the picture before I go off to screen sharing my browser or whatever. You see this cite button here, right? That cite button is your best friend. You're going to use that cite button and you're going to click APA, which is the American Psychological Association. You pretty much always use APA for studies, for research. Just make sure you're using APA formatting. And then you just copy that over to your paper. I want you to number your sources though, and make sure you're doing it in alphabetical order. I'll go over sourcing briefly in our next meeting. If you don't know how to source, just search up APA formatting, and then I'll go over it pretty much in depth. Isabel, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to ask about the actual structure of the literature review. So I've done them in the past, and the structure we've used has been a little bit different. So like, how strict is it to actually sticking to this? Like, can I switch it around a little bit if I feel like it maybe will flow better?
Yeah, definitely. So these sections are pretty much just like examples. These are mostly to help guide people who are new to research. If you want to move them around a little bit, you can do so. Just let me know, because sometimes people mess up, like they try to really change them up to however they want them to be. Like they're trying to customize it just to customize it. Don't do that. If it fits your flow, 100% do it. Just let me know.
Yeah, okay. And then the second question about the citations, if we're using APA, I'm assuming we have to do in-text citations as well.
Yes, I'll go over that. But that's something I'm going to go over very briefly. So in-text citations, yeah, I want you guys, if you don't know what in-text citations are, again, look up APA formatting and it'll go over that for you throughout, there's websites to explain that to you. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's a good point. Did someone else raise their hand? I feel like I saw somebody else.
If just a recommendation for anyone who's like really new to citations, especially if you're like trying to collect a lot of papers in one place. Throughout my high school, like 4 years, I've used Zotero, and it's like a browser extension, and you can keep all of your like papers in there, and it basically allows you to sample, it allows you to cite in Word, like it does it for you basically. And I find it really useful because you don't actually have to manually cite. So it kind of writes your bibliography for you, and it cites in text for you as well. So if anyone is struggling with that, I'm happy to put the name in the chat, and it's great.
Please do put that in the chat. And then Isabel, I wanted to ask, do you use PMIDs for that? Because I know that because I haven't used Zotero personally, but I think I know people who do use it, and they just paste a PMID and it cites it for them, or...
So basically it's an extension on your Chrome, and anytime you have, it's not just for PubMed, you can use it for any website whatsoever, or even PDFs and stuff. And there's a little like citation, you just, or like extension, you click on it, it adds it to your library, and then you just have to link it up with, I use Word. I'm not sure if it works on Google Docs, but you link it up with the Word, and basically anytime you want to cite, you just click on the extension again and it cites for you. You can also input it manually, like with the PMIDs, I think, but personally I just find it easier to do it on the actual website itself because you can just click the extension and it saves it for you. So yeah, there's a lot of tutorials up online if anyone's really confused by that.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I'll definitely link that in the scholars announcement. I'll look at that. Rhea, do you have a question?
Yeah, so the only two things that you can submit here are a research paper and then a literature review, right?
Yes.
So, I wanted to ask about the literature review like assignment. So like I wrote this like one paper that like synthesizes like published research on like BCI, but it's like more structured as like an interdisciplinary review than like more of a literature review because it has like an argument inside of it about like how like neuroscience and engineering have advanced in the field like together rather than like a regular literature review that like mainly just like summarizes like prior studies. So do you know if I'd be able to use that one or would I have
Yes.
to? I could.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
That is good.
Okay, thank you.
And by BCI, you mean brain computer interfaces, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Philip?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about like whether at what point should you choose to do a literature review? Like what conditions would you recommend us to have a literature review instead of choosing a research paper?
So a literature review is structured like a research paper. Research paper is not the correct term. It's literature review or an independent research project. A literature review is more so, it's really simple, it's easier to do, and it's like an introduction to research. The alternative would be an independent research project, which some people here have already started. And so if you don't have a project that you already have started, I'm going to ask that you do a literature review because it's simple and it's something that I can guide you through the process of. The independent research project is for people who are already doing research. I don't want them to, double down. They're doing two different things at the same time. So I'm allowing them to do that as their project, if that makes sense.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. The independent research project is more like it's a separate thing. It's where you're doing actual research with, actual like studies, actual databases. You're focused on one specific problem, like one specific question, and it's usually way more specific than a literature review. A literature review is kind of like a meta-analysis where you're looking through multiple papers. Amaya?
I just had a question about working like with other people. I already have like my independent research like with a mentor. So like would it put me at a disadvantage if I didn't like form a group with other people for the capstone project?
No, the group thing is completely optional. It's your choice. You don't have to do it as a group. And one thing I will say is that for our in-person symposium and then our publications on our website, like for who goes first and stuff and who actually presents, independent research projects have a slight advantage because they're typically more advanced. And we want this symposium to be not just a showcase for you guys, but to the public as well as what we're doing and what we're helping people do. And so if you have an independent research project that's way more advanced than a literature review, you're at a slight advantage to present, if that makes sense. Yeah, got it. Arnav?
Yeah, so the capstone project, is it essentially like a meta-analysis of a topic? Because I know you've been talking about like a literature review. Is it so? Would the meta-analysis like be a little bit more complex than the literature review, or could it
So when
just be?
no, when I say literature review, I kind of mean like a meta-analysis review, which is more like a literature review of you just focusing on one problem and then looking through studies. So it's kind of like a meta-analysis, which is like a study of studies, right? That's what I want you guys to do in your literature review. I don't want you guys to do like specific if you look up literature review, there's like a bunch of different definitions of what a literature review could be. I want you guys to focus on a problem and then use studies to come up with results for your problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Stella?
Um, so for the capstone, I'm like for people who aren't doing like their own independent research, but like I'm working under like a mentor, a postdoc, to do like research in a wet lab. But I was wondering like if I'm writing a summary for that for the lab and it's like it's not completely like an independent research project, but it's also partly a literature review because it's like
what I've been helping her with, but it's not my own experiment. Can I do that for the capstone? Sorry, that's really complicated.
No, I kind of get what you're talking about. Yeah, that's allowed. So it's more so your mentor is working, but you're doing the review process of that research, if that makes sense. Did I kind of get that right? Or
Yeah, so I'm running like experiments for her and I'm doing the analysis for her.
yeah. And running analysis,
Yeah.
you're still recognized as an author. So yeah, you would be allowed to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Partha, sorry, Shruti, I'm gonna ask that we stop questions here really quickly. I'm gonna go over the project. Partha, is you as well. I'm gonna stop the questions here for now, and I'll come back to questions after. So I remember Partha and Shruti, you guys would be first for questions when we come back to it. So I want to go over an example of my research project. Some of you, I'm gonna go over a link. Some of you guys might recognize this format if you've done science fairs in the past. One moment. Okay. So this is my research project, and this is we're actually getting this published right now. I'm working with my professor, Dr. Winston, which is one of our professors that are supervising and mentoring you guys. We actually did a complete project together. We've been working on this for like over a year and a half. We have this in publication right now with a research journal. And so I'm not going to show you guys the paper because that's getting published right now. I don't want to show the paper itself, but I will show you guys a slideshow I made for a science fair, basically. So it looks super complicated right now, right? The title is Paradoxical Associations Between Obesity and Neurodegeneration Biomarkers, an analysis of, I think it's cut off on my screen, but it says NFL right there. Yeah, NFL and GFAP plasma biomarkers in HABS HD. I'm going to kind of go over this a little bit. Paradoxical associations, that's the result that we got. Obesity and neurodegeneration biomarkers are the two like variables, if you're obese or not, and then what the neurodegeneration biomarkers show. And then we analyzed, these are the two specific biomarkers we looked at. And HABS HT, if you don't know what this means, it's just a study, the Health and Aging Brains study. And then HT means health disparities. If you remember our description of Dr. Winston in our last meeting, she really focuses on like ethnic disparities and health disparities. That's like the problem she kind of focuses on, and that's really important. So here's my abstract. It's quite long. Your abstract, you can either do one like kind of big paragraph, or you can actually separate it into your little subsections, right? Background, methods, results, conclusion, discussion, again, like the same thing. Background can also just be introduction, same thing. So I'm not going to go over the specifics of this. You guys can read this if you'd like. It's quite long. So I'm not going to read it out to you guys, but again, your abstract is formed at the very end, and it includes a short summary of everything you worked on, right? From your introduction to your methods, to your results, to your discussion. It's everything. So you do this at the very end. I'm not going to be sharing the slideshow with you guys, so I'm just going to have it playing, and then you guys can go back to the recording. But I will share a template for your capstone project. Right now is more so of an introduction to your capstone project. Our next meeting is when we get like in depth with your capstone project. I'll give you guys the templates. I'll give you guys stuff to work on. Right now, you guys are still formulating your question, and I'm going over stuff for you guys to start working on it. Like consider a problem, start looking for sources to look at. Right? Here's the problem statement, and this is where we get into the nitty gritty. This is the important part. So I explained this question to you guys, explain our title, but you might not know what my project is about, and you guys don't know why it's important. So I'm going to quickly explain why it's important, because this is something that, again, I'm passionate about, and this is something that we worked on together. Currently, Alzheimer's disease, and I'll show you guys right here in our introduction, because this is where you explain your problem. Alzheimer's disease is the leading driver of dementia, like also amnesia, which is like memory loss. And so it is the biggest cause of that in the world. And it's significantly and continuing to grow. All of us right now, we're young, but eventually we'll be old, and Alzheimer's disease targets age. And eventually, like statistically, around like 10%, maybe 20% of us here are we're gonna contract and we're gonna get Alzheimer's disease, and it's gonna go through pathogenesis, which means it's gonna go through progression. So people here are gonna get Alzheimer's disease, and that's kind of like a sad thing to think about. That's like it's a terrible disease, and it causes you to lose your memory, and it's really bad. Essentially, I'm not going to read all of it, but an important thing is that Alzheimer's disease testing is super expensive and super invasive. Like I'm sure you guys know how certain treatments and certain like testing at hospitals they're super expensive. Like it can cost upwards of tens of thousands of dollars to get specific testing. Right now, there's testing to inject or sorry, take away your cerebrospinal fluid from your body and then test that, or go through positron emission tomography or a PET scan, and those can be worth thousands of dollars with the testing. And people can afford that. It's also pretty invasive. You have to go through like a kind of procedure to get your cerebrospinal fluid taken away from you and then tested. So that entire like procedure, it's expensive, it's invasive, and it's also hard. It's not accessible. And so what this project focuses on is making that more accessible through blood-based biomarker testing. Literally, you just take out your blood, right? Your blood is tested, and through the biomarkers in your blood, we can determine whether or not you are at risk for Alzheimer's disease, you have Alzheimer's disease, where you are in the progression of Alzheimer's disease, stuff like that. And that's the problem that this focuses on. How can we make Alzheimer's disease testing more accessible, cheaper, and safer, right? Because some of these testings can be, they can also be unsafe. That's the problem. And I kind of wanted to share this with you guys just to explain that part. I think that's because obviously giving an example like the ice cream thing, a problem set, it's harder to do, but with an actual research project like this, I can explain you the problem and how that relates to the research directly. Because if you look at this title, you don't know what's going on. But when I explain the problem to you guys, you understand, okay, this is why he's doing that research, right? This is the problem. So here's the introduction. Here's my hypothesis. I'm not going to go over everything. You guys can read it if you'd like. And then you guys can always go back in the recording and read it. I'm not going to go super in depth on this. This is just an example. There's my hypothesis. Here's my materials. Again, this was an online thing. We looked at study results from thousands of patients internationally through this study called HABS-HD, right? They got that data for us, and we just kind of looked at it. We used some statistical software like RStudio and regression model to analyze the research, but a lot of it was just looking through hundreds of spreadsheets and comparing results. And this was our procedure. So these are what results would look like. You guys are probably not going to get formulated results that look like this. Your graphs are going to be much more simple. I'm going to show you guys how to make graphs on like Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets. That's what's accessible to you guys. These are results made by like specific websites through the professors, right? They had access to these websites and these programs to make these results. You guys might not be able to make this. If you do have something like this, super impressive on your part. It's not required, okay? But I hope you guys can understand what this is. These are scatter plots, and you can kind of see where the line of best fit or where the most ubiquitous part of the results are, which would be the lines. And then these are clean lines, which show you like a really specific, these are scatter plots, but made into just one dot, kind of to show you where the best ubiquitous result would be. Right, again, I'm not going to explain this too much in depth. I don't want to go over my project. That's something we'll go over later. I will go over my project later, I promise. And then our discussion, what does this mean? And what do our results show? And then a conclusion. You don't have to do a conclusion. You just typically make these together, but I did a conclusion for this specific thing. And then my references. This is kind of what references would look like. I want you guys to look at this. Again, they're numbered. Make sure you number them. And then, yeah, I don't think these are in alphabetical order. I kind of just put these here. Yeah, they're not in alphabetical order. This is not required. But you do want these in alphabetical order. That should be it for this. I just wanted to show you guys an example of what a project would look like when you're presenting it. Obviously, I did not present it to you guys, but I showed you guys what this would look like. When you guys do present, a slideshow is not required for a submission, but to be eligible to present, you guys are going to have a slideshow. So for example, if you want to present at our in-person symposium at USC Keck School of Medicine, you would need a slideshow created for you. I'll have a short template for that as well, but it's up to you if you want to do it. If you don't submit a slideshow, you're not eligible to present. So we're nearing the end of our meeting time. I'm going to take questions, but before I do that, I have an announcement to make. This is kind of bad news, and it's kind of unfortunate, but I do have an announcement to make. I mean, I'll give the dramatic little background, I guess. Hold on. Important announcement. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we are officially affiliated with USC, and we are. We're affiliated with the USC professors, right? We're affiliated with USC's faculty. You guys are able to present at USC's Keck School of Medicine because we have that reserved for this activity. And again, the pre-college online offices recognize us. But this is more so an issue with licensing and trademarks because we're our independent website. We're not a .usc.edu, and we're we were independently created years ago, and then we just became affiliated with USC. We don't have that administrative requirement to use their trademark, which we just found out. We were kind of misconstrued. We just got messages through USC's director at their trademark and licensing office. So at the current moment, they want us to take down the USC name. Again, the professors are USC faculty, so we're working internally with USC to get us affiliated. Right now, we're still working on communications. We didn't take it down yet because we're still waiting on, write backs. We're still working with USC's admin to get us officially affiliated. And it's not impossible to get it, but it is something that might be out of reach. So I'm just letting you guys know right now, at the current moment, there is a chance we'll be changing our name. It will still be Neuro Scholars. It just won't be USC Neuro Scholars. But I want to really emphasize and stress that us changing our name it doesn't change the program at all. It doesn't change you guys at all. I know it might sound, the face value might be like, oh, I'm not a USC Neuro Scholar. I'm a blank Neuro Scholar. We're going to figure out the name. Don't worry. But you guys are still not losing out on what this program has to offer. You guys would still be able to present at the USC Tech School of Medicine. You guys will still be getting not super direct mentorship, because again, there's so many of you, but you guys will get mentorship and supervision from USC professors. And then again, you guys, this was an 8% admissions rate. So I'm hoping you guys don't, you're not taking this as, oh, this program's not affiliated with USC. I don't want to do it anymore. So again, we're working on that official affiliation. We didn't take down the name yet because we're still waiting on communications. We're working internally with USC. It's not like emailing their office. We're working with their internal admin. But I just want to make it clear that within the next few days, within the next few weeks, if we're not able to get that official affiliation, we will change our name. And that's all that changed, just the name. You guys will still be able to present at the USC Tech School of Medicine. You guys are still working with USC Tech School of Medicine professors. All right. So, and I want to say, if you think that the name changing changes the way you perceive this program and you don't want to do it anymore, this program is not right for you. I don't think you want to do what this program has to offer. You kind of just want that title, which is USC Neuro Scholar. I've seen on LinkedIn, a lot of people have put USC Neuro Scholar in their little description. That's fine. But if you just have it there just for, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I just did. If you join just for that name value and that title, I'm going to ask you to message me and give your spot to somebody else, because you don't really care about the program. You just care about the title. So yeah, if that is a problem to you, just let me know. If that's a problem that we're losing the USC name, go ahead and let me know. We'll chat privately, and then we'll see what we can do. Because I don't think that if that's a problem to you, I don't think you care about the program that much. But I'm hoping that for most of you guys, that's not a big problem. Again, we're still working with USC professors and USC Tech School of Medicine, so it's more so a very administrative legal thing. And we're working on getting that fixed. But if we can't get that fixed, I just want to let you guys know. So that's all for my announcements and everything today. It is 4 o'clock, so if you don't have any questions or you don't want to stick around for questions, you're free to leave. And before you do leave, if you didn't do the attendance form, I will put it on the screen right now. I saw some people talk about that. Here's our attendance link. I hope you guys are here for most of the meeting. I will look at the recordings, but it's fine. It's time for questions, so as soon as you're done with the attendance form, you guys are free to leave. Okay, before I get to the order, I remember Partha and Shruti had questions specifically, so Partha, you can go first.
Yeah, so hi, Samyan. So this is my first time doing something like this. So I know a lot of people are going to use their previous research projects maybe. So since I've never done this before, would that put me at a disadvantage for the in-person symposium or not?
No. So what I said with the independent research, because it's typically more advanced, we want the at our in-person symposium, we want it to be as scientifically advanced as possible. If it's a really broad literature review, which is what I'm kind of having you guys do to get introduced to research, that's not typically the type of presentation to be super eligible for an in-person symposium performance, right? Those are more so, it's kind of just an introduction to research. So what the literature reviews have to offer is you getting introduced to research. It doesn't mean that it's not it doesn't mean it's not real research. It is real research, But for independent projects that have this like substantial research value to it, those are typically more likely to be chosen. But again, the biggest thing I focused on last meeting was substance, right? Substantial results. How does your result relate to your problem? That's what we're looking at most. Like if your results and your problem like your results really like point towards a solution to your problem, then that's more likely to be chosen if, based on anything else. I hope I kind of answered that. I don't know if
Yep.
that was kind of difficult.
No, that's fine. Thank you for answering my question.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Martha. Shruti?
Yeah, so I was wondering about like, is it limited like for the online symposium or just like capstone submissions in general, is it limited to one per person? Because like I'm like wrapping up like like independent like research right now, which I would be like eager to like submit for like the online symposium, but I also want to like do a separate literature review like through this program with like a couple of people that I've been like messaging with in like Slack, I think it's called. So
Yeah.
would I be like able to still like submit the one that I did with my peers here and the one that I did like individually, or would I have to like choose one to submit as my capstone?
So unfortunately, I mentioned in the first meeting that you are able to do multiple, but I spoke with the professors, and because we're kind of on a time crunch, and then also because we have to review them to see who's eligible to present at the USC School of Medicine. We don't want too much, we don't want too many projects to look through. So I'm going to ask that you submit one, and I think that's actually a little bit better for you because on our website you'll have like one specific publication rather than it being diluted with people having like dozens of submissions. But also I want you to focus on making that project the best it could be for your presentation, because if you submit two projects to present and then I tell you like maybe 3 days before that your project was submitted or your project was chosen and then blah 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 will present, you only have that amount of time to prepare that presentation. Whereas if you only have one, you have the entire time of the cohort to work on that project specifically, if that makes sense. Okay, awesome. Tanvi?
Yeah. So this is actually a question specific to your project. I noticed that you did a literature review, and I was just wondering how you controlled for like different methodologies and like different papers. Because I've been doing like a literature review by myself, and I was just curious about that.
Do you mean the HABS HT project I showed you?
Yes.
So that was more so an independent research project. We actually looked at we actually had a database of a study. We had the HABS HT as a study cohort. So we worked through like dozens and dozens of spreadsheets, and we created results and regression framework on R. Like we actually did research on these patients, and that's what I want to stress. Like it being an online digital thing, and us working on analysis and regressions, that doesn't make it any less of a research project than a wet lab project. A literature review is more so reviewing other people's studies, if that makes sense.
Okay, that makes sense.
But
Thank you.
but do you have another question? Because I feel like I kind of just said that it was a research project. Is there something that I didn't answer?
Oh no, that's fine. That
Okay.
clears everything up. Thank you.
Okay, my bad. Thank you. Yeah. Dan.
First of all, thank you so much for your time. And my question is, how can I do a literature review as impactful as an independent research?
So again, I want you to focus on a problem. So maybe like thinking of a problem right now, it's a super difficult thing. It's kind of like asking a middle schooler, think about your future. You need to think about what job you want to do right now. It's not an easy process. I want you to like really, really think about a problem in research or in medical studies or in health, that general broad, topic that interests you, and then also that you think has a reliable way to figure out a solution to that problem. Like for example, I'll use my project as an example. I think that the Alzheimer's disease thing is a huge thing, right? Blood-based biomarker testing would advance us through innovations like decades ahead. It'd give us access to accessible treatments and inexpensive treatments, right? Something like that. That's super impactful. But that is an independent research project. But kind of like what Lydia was saying. I don't know if Lydia is still here. She is here. I'm so sorry for using yours as an example, but you're the only one that spoke up. Like AI usage and the decrease of critical thinking skills, something like that. That's also super impactful. If there's like actual substantial results from that, like it does or like it definitely doesn't, then that's impactful enough to be chosen and be considered along independent research projects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Got it. Of course, Dan. Dhriti, did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned HABS HT, you used it for your project, so could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. My HABS H. So I don't want to go too much into my research project because I will present that on to you guys later. It's basically just a study of people who have health and aging brains. So they're healthy other than their aging brain. So they're not like, they don't have other heart problems or something. They just have aging brains. They typically have Alzheimer's disease, right? They have problems with dementia and stuff. And so with that cohort, with those people that are being studied, we're able to see how does this affect Alzheimer's disease specifically, because these people are healthy in every other aspect except their brain. They have Alzheimer's disease. And that's basically all they are. If that makes sense. Yeah. Akshaya?
Hi, first of all, thank you for your time. I was wondering, what are
Mhm.
good editing databases for publishing research?
There is a specific website to use to edit. Funny enough, we kind of just use Google Docs mainly to edit our paper, like to format it. And that's not bad for you guys. I feel like for most, especially for literature reviews, because these are probably not going to get published, we're just going to have you guys working on Google Docs. And so for this program, we're not going to go super in depth on specific platforms to use. You mean to like format your paper to make it look like a research paper, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can go into that at a later time or message you privately. I still have to look into those because we didn't really use that. I know that there's one website my professor used to make it a research paper for this specific website. But one thing I will mention is a lot of research journals, they take a Google Doc format and they do it themselves instead of you having to edit it yourself to make it look like a research paper, because different journals have different formats that they use, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Shreyas?
Hey, sorry for bringing up your project again, but I wanted
It's all
to
right.
ask about the neurodegenerative biomarkers because I wanted to work with them as well. So just to be clear, you're looking at NFL and I forgot the other one, but to see if obesity would have an impact on it, which would skew their understanding of Alzheimer's from the biomarker.
Yeah, so we worked with NFL and GFAP. NFL would be neurofilament light chain, and then GFAP would be gliofibrillary acidic protein. If you know what those are, then you know what the kind of biomarkers they are. And then we also worked with p-tau and amyloid. For everyone here who doesn't know what I'm talking about, we're just talking about proteins essentially. So we're getting a little nerdy right here, but though we worked with amyloid and protein p-tau as well. And we looked at different types of tau, like tau 251, and there's different numbers. I'm sure you know about that. If you don't, that's okay. Basically, we looked at the volume of protein in the blood and then how that affects the brain. So we looked at if you have this amount of this biomarker, how does your Alzheimer's disease compare to someone who has a lesser amount or something, right? And the reason we went really narrow, we focused on obesity, is because and you know what? I will just share this with you actually, because
Yeah, that would be great. I'm really
I'll just show you
curious.
the results. If you look here, I'm so sorry for everyone waiting on questions. We're going to go over that. I promise we're going to go over that soon. If you see here, we have body mass index, which represents obesity, right? Once you're above like that 30-ish line, you're considered obese. You can see it's going down, and that means that you have less if you have a higher BMI, you typically have less GFAP in your body, and so the initial instinctual reaction is, oh, the more obese you get, you kind of have less GFAP. And GFAP is something that's bad. So more GFAP is more neurodegeneration, less GFAP is less neurodegeneration. But that doesn't make sense, right? More obese people having a less adverse reaction, which means less GFAP. You might see that and be like, maybe I should become obese to not be at risk for Alzheimer's disease. But that's not true. And that's why my project is called Paradoxical Associations. So if you look at my discussion, actually, I think to my conclusion right here, our second bullet point, you can see my cursor, right? You guys mentioned that. We mentioned hemodilution. So this was one of the studies that we looked at. Hemodilution is dilution in the blood. So because people with higher BMIs, we also looked at body fat percentage a little bit. So that's something that we have to consider for sorry, for blood-based biomarker testing, you have to take body fat percentage into consideration. For people with high BMIs and high body fat percentage, they have more blood. So even though they might have the same or even higher levels of GFAP, because they have so much blood, it's diluted. And when you measure it, it looks like it's becoming lesser, but that's not true. And so why this is important is because the HABS-HD study, when they measured BMI, this is the result that they came up with. This is, more BMI means less GFAP. And when we look at that result, like just looking at that single-handedly, what that tells us is that higher BMI means less adverse reaction, but that's not true, right? And so that's why this is important, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Awesome. I don't know if other people have their hands raised. I think everyone's hands are not raised anymore. I just see one person. So if you did have a question, raise your hand again. I'm so sorry. I don't know why everyone's hands are down. Maybe I already answered every question. I don't know. Oh, okay. I see. Never mind. I see them now. Okay, Lydia.
Sorry, I didn't mean to wait this long, but because I was unsure. Are we is there something? Okay, I'm gonna be clear what I'm saying. What do we need to have gotten done by now? I know there's not really homework. It's a project, obviously, but is there anything that we should have gotten started on, or what should we be doing right now?
All right. So if you haven't already, finish your summary. Did you finish your summary?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. So that's our main
I didn't know it was
task.
2 paragraphs, so
It's okay. Don't worry. But yeah, the summary is the main task right now at hand because we're gonna go over that in our next meeting, right? The reason I didn't go over it this meeting is because I didn't have enough time to look through everybody's summaries, and then people didn't submit their summaries, unfortunately. So that's our main task. But then as of right now, the reason I went over the capstone project I went over it kind of broadly. I want you to think of a problem. So I'm gonna mention that in the announcement. I want you guys to start thinking of problems. And then if you already have a problem, write your introduction. Right? Your introduction is super important for your research project. Again, it's super overlooked. People write a small introduction because they're so focused on I want results and I want to talk about my results, right? But your introduction is just as important, if not sometimes even more important, because it talks about your problem, right? And your problem is the most important part of your research. I can't stress that enough. So I think that that's a good starting point, your problem and your introduction, right? And so I'm going to mention that in the announcement. I want people to start thinking about problems and writing their introductions. If they don't have one by the time we meet next, it's okay because that is hard to think of, but that's something I want people to start thinking of, if that makes sense.
So do you want me to, because I kind of just changed my topic and I put it in Slack chat, and then I got a lot of people. I was thinking, should I form my group, and then after I form my group, I'll start writing an introduction?
Yeah. So if you want to work in a group, I can't really facilitate how the group things work because I can't make a specific group chat for every group. You guys have to do that on your own. So you have to figure out your group. You have to figure out communication with your group. If your group does or doesn't communicate with you, that's kind of off my hands, right? I can't control whether or not your group member is communicating with you. If you have a group that's communicating, I'd ask that you guys DM on Slack. You guys create I think you guys can create Slack group chats. If you can't, get each other's Instagrams, get each other's numbers, something like that. Find a way to communicate. And then, yes, start working on the introduction. So I think if you click on someone's Slack profile, there's their email on there. So you guys can make a Google Doc, a shared Google Doc, think about a problem, and then start drafting your introduction.
Okay, sorry. I was just looking right now. Thank you.
You're good. Yeah, of course. Philip?
Yeah, so I actually had 3 questions. So yeah.
It's okay.
So first off, how to make a literature review idea?
Right. So that's something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No. So I went over the topics in the application when you apply. There was a bunch of separate subtopics. There's neurotechnology, there's psychology, neurodegeneration, developmental disabilities, right? Alzheimer's, sorry, not Alzheimer's, sorry, autism and ADHD, Down syndrome. Those are neurodevelopmental disorders. There's a bunch of different subtopics of neuroscience, and you had to select that. So if you didn't select that, then you didn't have an application, right? So I want you to think back to what you chose, what interests you in neuroscience, and then focus on that topic. and try to find some sort of problem, some sort of question. This part's the hardest part, honestly. I think finding the problem, finding the question is quite difficult, but you can try to draft up questions. And then again, if you're having trouble finding a question, there's always tools like Consensus AI, or you can use like ChatGPT or Gemini to help you figure out what kind of questions you want to think of. Um, I'd recommend you try to do it on your own. Try to figure out what kind of question you can think of yourself, because you might have a question or a topic that you're super interested in. You just don't know how to frame it, but you are always able to use AI as your help.
Also, when you are making a topic, right, is it okay for it to be niche? Like, it doesn't like affect that many people, like, really rare disorder, something like that?
Yeah,
Is it
that's
okay to
completely
like do a
okay.
literature review on that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Because like it sometimes like people might look at it as like not so relevant. So like for example, I was for my capstone project, I was thinking of looking at this disorder called the foreign accents, this syndrome called the foreign accent disorder. Sorry, got the name mixed up. But like I was planning to look at that for my capstone project. So do you think it would be okay to look at such a disorder which is like so niche and like at most 150 people have it all over the world in history?
So that's up to you. You're able to do that. But what I want to say is that if you do choose to do something like that, you have to consider that it's going to be hard to find other studies on that. If it's super, super niche, super narrow, you might not be able to find studies that relate to your project. And if you're not able to find studies, you can't complete your literature review. So if that's something you're super interested in, you could 100% go for that. But if you're having trouble finding papers related to your question or your problem, I'd say just stray away, find a different problem to focus on, because finding those sources are going to be super difficult. And I want you to have at least 5 sources. And then, your results still have to be substantial. Like you can find papers, but they might not be super in depth. And then your research is basically kind of just very, you know, borderline broad, right?
Okay. And
Okay.
one more thing for the research papers or literature reviews, right? What what threshold does it have to cover so that it can get published on the USC website? Like the USC Neuro
So,
Scholars website, sorry.
right. So you guys are gonna have everything on the sections, right? What I have on screen right now. Like some people mentioned, you can change them around as long as you message me. They have to be like relevant, but you have to have, you have to have results. You have to have a discussion. This is basically your guideline right here. You just need all of these things right here, um, and then you can get put on our website. It just has to be substantial research, right? There has to be a problem. There has to be a solution. If that makes sense.
So it just has to be substantial research? Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, got it. Okay, I thought there was some select few, like a limit to what could be published. That's why I was asking. All right, thank you so much.
Got it. Of course. Thank you. Nitish, I can't see you, by the way. I don't know if your camera's.
Ooh, yeah, I don't know. My camera should be on. I don't know if it's just like not working right now. Sorry.
It's all right.
But yeah, what I was gonna say is you mentioned like this idea of like a difference between like substantial and broad literature reviews. Can you maybe give us like an example of like what would differentiate, or like maybe just an example of both?
Yeah, I could try. Hold on. I'm gonna go into the Slack. Somebody did DM me a project idea. I'm gonna see if I can go over that real quickly, because they had a really good project idea. Um, Hold on. Give me one moment. But basically, for your idea, it should be something that, your problem should be something that's important. It shouldn't be like a kind of irrelevant problem. Okay, I have someone, I think they're in this call right now. Let me see if they're here. No, they're not here. But I think I'll just share like a very broad thing that they're doing. They're doing a research on, or like a review on therapies used to treat diseases that are kind of like a psychological disease. So for example, Huntington's disease. They're trying to find a review on therapies that are used to treat that type of disease. And so your research topic regarding that might be like, how does this therapy compare to this therapy to treat X disease? something like that. And then you'd go to different studies and you're like, maybe there's a study on X treatment to treat this disease, and there's a different study on Y treatment to treat these diseases, but maybe there's not so much of an interfocus on comparing these two treatments, right? So that's something that you could do. And that's what's substantial. You're like doing something that's not, you're doing something a little unique. Obviously, all the research that you guys are completing are, they've probably been done before, or like, they've been done to some extent. I don't expect you guys to have fully unique independent research. And that's, a literature review isn't like, that's not what that is. You're reviewing other studies, right? But that's what this person is doing. And that's something I consider substantial because you're comparing treatments, you're comparing something, and then you're getting a result from that to determine what might be better, what might be worse, on a case by case basis, what might you do, what might you use, something like that. It has real world value. That's the most important thing. It has real world value. Thanks, Star. Awesome. I don't know. I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong. Is it Amog?
Yeah.
Okay.
So question: is there a maximum number of pages that the research paper should be at when you submit it?
No max. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna put a max because some people are gonna put a lot. I'm gonna say max like 20 pages. And that should be more than enough for you to get that done. If you're doing more than that, then you're submitting like a full-on research project that can go to a journal. That shouldn't be on the USC page. That should go to a journal, right? So I'm going to say max 20 pages. If you're at 20 pages, I'm going to ask you to consider a research journal, like actually, because that type of research, if you're not writing just gibberish, you're just filling words in, if that's real, like relevant research that you have there, then consider a journal. But yeah, I'm going to say max 20 pages.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna ask you really quickly. Do you think that's like, is that like a reachable limit, or do you think that's like a high limit?
When I submitted to journals in the past, that was the limit. 20
Okay,
pages. Yeah.
got it. Perfect. So, all right, Kayla.
Sorry, I know we're going pretty over, but I was just wondering, in terms of like organization for the final, like what the material should be. Like I know you said before, like a slideshow is optional, but like your ability to present is like contingent
Okay.
on.
Yeah. So there's three things, or there's two things I'm gonna have everybody submit, which is a paper, right? It's like your document with all your stuff in it, and then an abstract. So you're gonna have like, sorry, not an abstract. I'm so sorry. A poster. Sorry, a poster is where you have like the title on the top. Do you know what a poster is? I'm pretty sure you do, right? For those of you who don't know, a poster is like a kind of like a rectangular poster where you have all your stuff on it. You have your introduction, you have your results, your methods, everything there. Your results would have your figures in the middle. It's like a way to look at a paper. Instead of reading through that entire paper, you have like the big summary, the big points, all on one poster. And it's super important to know how to be brief, and that's why I'm making you guys a poster. The only thing that's optional is the slideshow, and that's the thing that makes you eligible for a presentation at USC School of Medicine. So a presentation would be like, it's kind of more, it's similar to your abstract, or sorry, not your abstract, I should say that, your poster, but think of like your paper, but you're making a poster for each section. So you're making like a slide for your introduction, a slide for your results, kind of like what I did. That slideshow I showed you is very basic. I don't want your presentation to be like that. The reason that one was basic was because it was for a science fair. They had a really basic requirement. But for you guys, I want you guys to have like, I'm going to make a template for the USC background, right? Or maybe eventually it might not be the USC background, but I'm going to have that template for you guys. And then you guys are just going to make a slideshow presentation for each thing that you're going to do. So that's the only requirement for presenting. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Got it. Nitish, did you still have a question, or is your hand still up?
No, I think I just wrote it down, sorry.
No, you're good. And then Kayla, the same thing with you. Did you have another question? Or okay. So that's all. Thank you guys for sticking around. I'm hoping that you guys are here because you want to hear the questions. If you have a question, raise your hand, ask in chat, whatever. And again, a big thank you to all of you guys who came. It's not super easy to set this up, but I'm pretty passionate about this project, and I know it's not easy for you guys to constantly be here, have your cameras on, make the time for this. A lot of you guys are not in the United States. A lot of you guys are not in California. Some of you are in New York. Some of you are in London. Some of you are in India. Some of you are in, we have people from like all over the world, really. And so I thank you guys for making time to be here. If you have questions after this meeting, you guys can always message me on Slack. I'm going to say for questions, it's easier to message me on Slack than to email me. Email are for more like formal things. Like I mentioned this last time, for like the forms and stuff. If I have something that I want you guys to email me, I'll tell you to email it to me. But for most things, you guys can just message me on Slack. And so before we leave today, I want to just say make sure that you guys focus on your capstone. Think about like the project aspect. Think about the problem that you're going to work on, and then start drafting your introduction. Basically, over the next week, that's the main task, right? So our first task of last week was the summary. This task is problem and introduction. If you're having trouble, again, you guys have access to the AIs to kind of brainstorm. I don't want the AI to come up with your project. I want you to come up with the topic and ideas, but just use the AI to guide you because sometimes it's hard to make it scientific. And even if you do have a question and idea, a lot of people are asking me for help on what to do. And I pretty much, I figure out like some way they can form it. But you guys can also ask AI, like, how can I make this title that I made more scientific? How can I make this question that I have shorter and more relevant? Something like that. Always use the tools at hand available to you guys. I'm going to ask one last time. Does anybody have any more questions? I saw someone raise your hand. Okay. That's all for this meeting. You guys are free to go. You guys can leave. I'm going to end the meeting in like a minute. So thank you guys for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.